The following discussion is not necessarily the views of all involved. The goal is to start open and honest discussion in a Christian worldview. Like all things, weigh what you hear with what you know and join us in our pursuit for the truth. Enjoy the podcast.
Illusion magic.
I don't think Jesus played D&D. Just going to say that.
What?
Which is kind of cool. It's like the first time they actually get to go to Egypt and they don't just screw them over with like some weird wife shenanigans and stuff. And we're just hanging out in the Bible doing normal Bible things, and that's one of them.
Are we bonding over a traumatic child experience with our Bible? All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Second Rate Saints podcast. We're wrapping up our Patriarchs series with Joseph. I'm Caleb. To my left is...
I'm Joel. And to my left
is Joshua.
We are missing Colton today.
It's sad.
It is sad.
And the norm, we're missing Stuart again.
I'm always missing Stuart. Not even when we're on the podcast. I just miss him.
That's fair.
Every episode, it just gets sadder.
It does.
Because it's like, oh, this is the 20th episode. We haven't had him on the podcast. This is the 21st episode.
32nd episode, actually.
Were that many episodes?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I look at it every once in a while.
Joel, you read a book recently. What'd you read?
Are you asking me what have I read?
I am. Thank you. Thank you for knowing the smooth transition.
The smooth transitions of the what have you read. So this last probably week and a half, I went through a book called Science in the Mind of the Maker. Now, since the last few years of Bible college have not had me reading a lot of apologetics, so this was like kind of refreshing to get into. Science. Now, Caleb has also heard me complain about this book, so I'm going to be playing both sides here. There are things I really like, and there's things I really don't like about apologetics. I think in some ways it's accepting a challenge that we've just blindly accepted, that we've allowed scientific thought, and I'm using air quotes there, scientific thought, to define the terms that we have to answer, right? So we have to have an explanation for how evolution works in the Bible, or we have to, like, this kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
so that's where theistic evolution rises.
Ask questions of the Bible that it was never intended to answer.
Yeah, I mean, it was Galileo's whole thing. It was like, the Bible is not a science textbook, but where it speaks on science, it seems to be harmonious.
Yeah,
like that's his kind of outlook, right? And Science in the Mind of the Maker puts forth this. By Melissa Cain Travis. That's the author. She puts forth what's called the Maker's Thesis. And it's basically that an honest and true pursuit of truth will reveal biblically adjacent truth. Right? So that if we're using the Bible as our yardstick of truth, we can measure scientific discoveries and see that they do line up in a surprising number of ways.
Sure.
A couple of her specific examples would be like the teleological argument. As we study philosophy more and more, or the cosmological argument, things like that. So these are the origin of the universe. As we study the origin of the universe, even from a secular point of view, a lot of the presuppositions of science are coming in line with with Christian belief, that there was a creator, that we are made for a purpose, that there was an origin to the universe, period, right?
Yeah, well, I think, now I read it a couple months back.
Yeah.
And I speed read it, so I don't know how much I actually really got, to be honest with you. The parts that I enjoyed were less hyper-apologetic, was more her just going through, hey, it's not, Christians aren't reactionary when they say, evolutionism or evolutionary thought is compatible with Christianity. It's not reactionary. Christians right from the very beginning were like, oh yeah, no, I can see how that works. Or how, there had been multiple non-literal interpretations for Genesis 1 to 3. Yeah. Or how the heliocentric versus the, I can't think of the other term. Heliocentric versus the Earth-centric, the Terra-centric,
I don't remember what the term is for it.
Yeah, whether the sun is the center of our solar system or the reality in this case, at that time, or the Earth, and how Christians lined up on both sides of those arguments. Christians aren't being reactionary when all of a sudden they go, you know what? No, I do think that this maybe has more legitimacy.
Yeah.
I liked that. And
even that there are scientific arguments that are contained within the structure of the church. We're talking about it to each other. So we fight with each other on some of these things, right? Depending on what the Bible puts forth, right? Like, I mean, flat earthers use the Bible as a proof text.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's a huge misinterpretation. And it's blatantly proven false by the scientific community. So we have to answer that. We have to make those things, we have to recognize their cohesion.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I won't go through everything because it is a very broad explanation of a huge amount of scientific apologetics. But one chapter I want to focus on is her chapter on Darwin, which I think she does a really good job of, because it's not like he came up with an idea nobody could counter, and then it just took off and destroyed any kind of Christian understanding of the world.
Which is how it's commonly thought in pop culture.
Well, in neo-Darwinism it is, right? But at the time, there were theologians, scientists, philosophers all coming against this idea, and I think some of them were pretty successful. Even like she talks about the watchmaker analogy, right, which is ancient, right? Like Cicero came up with it. So even before Darwin, there was this idea of like the complexity of design indicates a creator, right? This is the argument from intelligent design. You'll see it in a lot of Christian apologetics, even if you go into like William Lane Craig's stuff.
Muslim and Jewish as well.
Yeah, Muslim and Jewish will also use it just because, creation story is the same, or largely the same. And so is his name John Paley? Is that his?
It sounds familiar. But
yeah, so he was actually before Darwin. He wrote a book called Natural Theology, and she covers this, where one of his central points was watches were always intended to make better watches, right? Which I thought was a really cool take on it. Is like the development of watches is not a capstone, right? And this is the idea of microevolution, right? That Darwin's theories can still be true within a microevolution context. Now, I'm not like a pro-evolution, anti-evolution guy. I prefer not to take sides on it because it's not my area of study. But I think from an apologetic standpoint, we can definitely see the usefulness of intelligent design as a proof for the existence of God, or at least a teleological argument that we've been created for a purpose, right? And I think that Paley's point of watches were always intended to make better watches is super interesting, right? Yeah. That's my biggest takeaway from the book. And
where would you rate this in a 1 to 5?
It's going to be so dependent on the reader.
Okay.
If you're someone who likes apologetics but hasn't read a lot, it's going to be phenomenal. If you're someone who's really into apologetics and has read quite a bit, you're probably going to know the counters to a lot of the arguments that are already in it, right? Apologetics feels a little bit like chess to me, where sometimes if you know the move that defeats another move, it takes away from the value of the reading, right?
Yeah.
So it might not be as in-depth as you like. Like if you were super into like quantum physics apologetics or like metaphysics, or if you have gone into like William Lane Craig's super in-depth stuff, you might not enjoy it as much. I don't know.
What does that mean about its target? What would you say its target demographic is?
I think it's with those who have begun to struggle with things like theistic evolution, and even like the historical problems of Scripture in explaining creation. Young Earth creationists, that kind of stuff. I think it's super useful to have this as an anchoring point of what we actually believe as evangelical Christians. Because I don't even think it represents a Catholic worldview as much as it does.
It might also
just theistic.
Just theistic, yeah.
It might also be a good book for the kind of like the parent that is raising a Christian family that is sending their kids to public school, and so they're constantly being confronted with the evolutionary story, but the parents not quite equipped with like, how do I deal with this, or like, what should they know from the Christian perspective as a counter to just the constant pose of purely evolutionary thought.
And some stuff is not even really some stuff isn't even a counter.
Yes.
What it is it's okay. That is fact. What let's say X is, that is fact. But the claim that is made off of X, that's not part of the fact that's proven. That's a philosophical presupposition that's just kind of snuck in there. And so I think as Christians we need to be equipped to kind of differentiate between those.
It could also work for people you hear making bad arguments, right? It's people who are like, well, evolution is just a theory. Well, it's like, no, in science, a theory is something to be interpreted very differently. And she covers that as well.
Yeah.
It's only like 200 pages. It's a pretty short read.
Yeah, it's not a heavy book. But like I said, it was a bit of a breath of fresh air after not reading apologetics for so long, because it was an interest of mine early on in college. I think I would have enjoyed it more then than I did now.
And just because I like to ask Josh this question, Josh, how would you rate the cover as an aesthetics guy?
Cover? Give it here.
It does look like a high school science textbook a little bit.
I do like the Vitruvian Man and the brain scan, the MRI brain scan in there, imaging scan, and then what's the tool called?
Protractor or whatever?
Protractor, yeah.
I don't think that's what it's called. Protractor's the one
it's
that's a rounded ruler.
You're right.
It's the one part of the Freemason symbol, just the top part of the triangle, not the measuring stick.
So it's got a couple things you like. Okay.
This
is good.
No.
This is good.
And yeah, I mean, I give it out of 10, like a 4.
Okay.
Just for originality's sake, like it's nothing huge there.
Yeah,
It's
I
just
mean,
reusing generic assets.
Every like semi-intellectual book that's like trying to be something puts the Vitruvian Man on there. It's just like, this is the stamp
Or
of
conspiracy theory.
Or conspiracy theory. It's just like, it's every attempt of a book to be something great and slap the Vitruvian
I love
Man
how
on there.
hard his takes are.
Yeah.
No, but the book sounds good. It's got a good forward from Lee Strobel on the front top.
Yeah, I got mixed feelings about Lee Strobel.
The best part in one of the chapters is where she just hugs J.P. Moreland's philosophical argument for how possibly humans may have a metaphysical compound, which we would often call the soul. And it was just like, oh yeah, J.P. Moreland's really good. I should read more of him.
Yeah. She's also
She cites her sources well.
She's also got a ton of sources.
Yeah.
In the notes, like this is a huge bibliography.
Yeah. For a book that size.
She did her doctorate thesis on this topic, if my memory's right.
Oh,
that's
is
cool.
This her doctorate thesis? No. Oh, that's a summarized version.
Yeah. No, it's.
I think her doctorate thesis is more specific.
I would give it a 4 out of 10, but for any reader who, like me, is really convinced by covers, buy it and then give it away.
Yeah.
Read it and then give it away if you don't want it on your bookshelf. It's worth reading.
That's funny.
Yeah.
But we're on our last episode of the Patriarch series.
Yes.
I'm excited. You guys are excited. Hopefully the listeners are excited. Joel.
Yeah.
Who are we talking about?
Well, we're going to talk about Joseph. But before we
Smith?
really hop into our topic, I think I'm going to plug our socials.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we've tried to do that earlier on in the episode just because, if you don't listen that long, you're never going to get our contact information or whatever. If you've got questions about the episode, if you've got something to contribute to the episode, we would love it if we got an email from you at secondраtesaints@gmail.com. You can also check us out at www.secondраtesaints.com. That's where we have links to everything we're doing. We've got our Instagram on there. We've got our YouTube link on there. We've actually got blog posts on there. We're not as frequent with that one. That's kind of a future project that we're going to start gradually doing more and more often as we, come out of a busy season of school. We'll have some more time to contribute to that.
Now that you have to buy the blue check mark on Twitter, are we gonna do that?
I don't want to use Twitter. I feel like every day it's something weird and political going on.
We have that name logged. If you see us on Twitter, follow us. Don't expect much.
If you see us posting something on Twitter, it's probably not us.
But actually, if you were to reach out to us on Twitter and we notice, it would make our day.
I don't even know if we'd notice. I had to delete it off my phone. You know, they'll just give you unprompted like news alerts on Twitter.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I wasn't even posting. It's so dumb. I don't like Twitter, but that's probably the reason why we don't have it.
Twitter is aggravating.
Come on, Elon, why?
One thing we want to do is make interaction for our listeners easier. And one way we're going to do this is by having polls on both our Instagram and our YouTube. It's going to do things like help you decide what topic we tackle next. It's going to basically give us some feedback to see what you guys are most interested in. So as we go forward, we can get an authentic conversation going.
Any future thoughts in real time would probably be based on that.
Yeah, we've been playing around with the concept of thoughts in real time. If you listen to our episode, I believe 2 episodes back, where we will be responding to those questions. We might make it a casual segment on the podcast if we get enough. If not, we're probably going to just collect them until we can make an episode out of it. So yeah, that's our plans for Second Rate Saints. Check us out, subscribe to us. You know, we're trying to grow our following a little bit, just get the conversation a little bigger. That's our biggest thing.
But basically, your call to do the questions is like the more they get involved, the more we're able to do stuff.
Oh, for sure. It's a way to contribute to the podcast in a way that's not financial or even time consuming, really. Yeah. It's just, you know, if we've inspired a thought in your head, then we'd love to hear it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd say we get into our episode on Joseph, the last of the patriarchs. Now, we call it the Joseph story, but the reason it kind of fits into the patriarchs is because from a lot of commentators I was reading, the Joseph story is actually kind of a misnomer. Because it's talking about Jacob and his extended family. It's talking about how Jacob has moved his entirety of his family to Egypt and why that happened and all the forensics behind it. And even some of the individual actions that take place during that time, right? It actually has a lot more character development. I tried to overlay it onto the hero's journey, but it just turned out to be a side project all itself. So maybe as a future blog post or something like that, that might show up. But for the purposes of this podcast, and so it doesn't become 2 hours of me just explaining what the hero's journey entails, we're going to make it just biblically based stuff. Yeah.
Nice. That sounds like a great blog post, though.
Doesn't it? It's kind of cool. I love literary criticism, but I love it when it's applied to the Bible. It's so weird that we've just come up with... Again, it's one of those things. Literary criticism is similar to the apologetics thing, where if you have an earnest... seeking for it, you realize how significant of a literary piece the Bible is, right? Because it has created a format that is accidentally or intentionally mimicked in modern literature. Yeah. So cool.
I think both.
Oh, it's definitely both, right? But even there's Carl Jung's idea of, is it Carl Jung or Joseph Campbell? It's one of them. Not only archetypes, but dreams as the myth of culture. Sorry, myth as the dream of culture. Right, so...
That's a fun idea.
It's a whole thing. But then we have to go into why you would classify the Bible as myth, and not everyone likes that. So, whatever.
Well, we might tackle that one.
Yeah.
At some point.
Structure of this episode. It's going to be in 5 different acts because we get kind of, and I know that's a lot and it sounds like a lot, but you'll kind of understand when I go through it. So the first one is family conflict in Canaan. Kind of based off of, this is where Jacob kind of ended off in the last story. If you listen to our last episode, after the descendants of Esau in chapter 36, we get into 37, and that's all family conflict. So that's 37 to 38 chapter. And then chapter 2 is Joseph's conflict with imperial power in Egypt. So this is kind of his solo adventure. When he doesn't have as much influence from his family, it kind of sets up the scene. Then Act 3, which is 42 to 44, the family conflict in Canaan and Egypt. So this is when we start drawing in some of his brothers from the earlier act. Then Act 4. I keep on saying Acts 4 because I'm expecting to talk about the book of Acts, but it's not that. It's Act 4. This is 45 to 47. The family is resolved in Egypt. And then Act 5, the family is blessed in Egypt and is looking to Canaan. So this is kind of like setting it up as the promised land as we go into Exodus, and it kind of just sets the stage for what we can be expecting. It even, in my mind, it encapsulates a lot of the oral tradition that the Israelites would be bringing into Egypt with them, right? So this is, you can even see that at the end when Joseph and Jacob has their bones brought into Egypt.
Yeah.
Or Joseph wants them brought out of Egypt, Jacob wants them brought to Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I think, cool. Yeah.
It's cool.
Any thoughts, questions, concerns?
I mean,
Before we get into the meat and potatoes?
I think what's another thing to highlight is as you read the story of Joseph, you will also see, like, we're going to get into it more in depth, but there's heavy Christ imagery,
Oh, yeah.
like foreshadowing. There is also, it is as it is the end of Genesis.
Yeah.
It is the lead up to, like, this is the place of blessing. Everything is going right. It's almost as if they've returned to the garden.
Yeah.
But it's not.
We'll probably.
But we'll get there.
Yeah.
But those are two things that it's like, this is the ramp up. But
Is it? I didn't come across this, but this is what I've generally thought. Is Joseph set up, but then he never really pays off to be the fulfillment of the promises of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and of all the stuff in Genesis, like kind of 1 to 11? Like, is it kind of set up as, like, there's a lot of things that tie together, but then they just don't really get resolved? Not to match the cosmic level that started the book. I don't know. That's how I've thought of it. I haven't read it anywhere. It's just kind of. Do either of you guys get that kind of view?
yes.
Okay. Have you read that anywhere?
Yes. Specifically, it's, you've got the son. They're blessed. Egypt's blessed because of that son. Right? Because of Joseph being there, the nation of Egypt is saved, not just the Canaanite family.
Yeah.
You've then got the whole world is blessed because the people around Egypt come and get food from Egypt because of Joseph. So you've got all of the blessings are brought. You've got the son, you've got the beginning of a nation, because with Jacob and his family, just the family, there's like 70 people by the end. And then all of the stuff that each of those family members owns, all of the servants, the small militia, all that stuff. But as you see the marker, which is a reference at the end of the story, Joseph dies.
Yeah.
Right. And Jacob dies. And it's that reminder back to Genesis 4 and he lived so long and then he died, and he lived so long and he died, and he lived so long and he died, as a reminder of, because of your sin, you will die.
Okay.
I get that aspect. My thought was more with the. Well, I guess you did mention it.
Yeah.
The blessing of the nations stuff.
It's there,
Yeah.
definitely. But it's also, because of that, it's basically saying, this is what it will look like. It's the beginning of that typology theme. This is what it will look like.
So in Joseph, you have the first answer to the, let's say, the first installment of the typology to answer all of those problems, which is the promise given to Abraham.
Yeah. You've got the one who is second to the king, who has the Spirit, so the religious leader, who preaches the word of God, is called by God to be into that higher status, goes into the pit, all that stuff. We'll get into there.
Betrayed.
Yeah, betrayed, is not seen as his own people, as one of him, falsely accused for that crime. But yeah,
cool.
I don't want to get into the Christology stuff yet,
Cool.
because that'll come up. But yeah,
it's going to be it's decently apparent as we go through.
Well, even in our other episode, we talk about the suffering servant with Isaac. You see the same thing with Joseph. But
The suffering servant. Which one are you talking about there?
with a lot of the themes Caleb mentioned in the Isaac video, Isaac a lot of the themes in the suffering servant in Isaiah are taken from Isaac.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. No, I understand what you're saying.
And so you see the same thing in Joseph with his suffering. But Joel,
Yeah.
Act 1.
Act 1. So this is the family narrative back in Canaan. So as everything is being set up, it takes up a huge amount of like real estate in Genesis, as we all know, taking up from chapters 37 to 50, the whole story. It's got like some weird character development stuff. It's also got the duplicate dreams, so double dreams. Which this is kind of the first occurrence of a double dream. So dream interpretation in the ancient Near East is incredibly important, especially for high-ranking officials. So the fact that Joseph has this double dream of his brothers bowing down to him, and even his father bowing down to him is pretty significant. It's also the first dream that occurs in the Bible that doesn't have God as an active voice. So it's passively referring to God's plan. So even the fact that he sees the dream as God speaking to him could already be foreshadowing the Spirit being upon him at this young age, which we don't even know how young he would be, to be honest with you. Some have said 15 based off of kind of like arbitrary numbers. But that seems really young for even any major biblical character to be 15 years old.
Considering people are having kids at 89.
Well, because you do have Samuel, who's like interaction with the Spirit of God at like very young age.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's at a completely different era.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just in the Bible, it's you have examples.
One point my fiance made when she was reading on this topic, because she was doing some research for her own thing on Joseph. Weirdly enough, at the same time we were planning this episode, she mentioned that one of the words used for Joseph being an assistant could also be that he shepherded his brothers, right? So not a shepherd's assistant, but more like a shepherd manager almost, which is like a really weird turn of phrase. I don't even have the commentary that she got that out of, but she's my source. So there we go. And
Trust me.
It's my source. My fiance made it up.
Yeah. And another point to the dream, there are similar dreams in other religious texts and in other history.
Yeah, you had mentioned you'd done some looking into that.
Yeah.
What does that really look like?
Specifically, the one person that's similar is Sargon of Akkad has a very similar dream, double dreams, calling him to a rise of power based on a god.
Okay.
Like giving him dreams that he's going to be rise to power. And he's from a nowhere status. He's not the people group that is in power. And then his story later is the story that is imprinted behind Moses's rise to power. They're very similar. So that's significant that it's near the Egyptian story. So it's Sargon of Akkad is deeply related to that history there. Then you've also got similar dreams in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Sumerian king Gudea references having a double dream as well. The poem of the righteous sufferer, didn't get into that too much, but and the Mari text, which is the same one that brought up the Abrahamic quote about what was it? Marriage?
Yeah, there was something about marriage. We brought it up a couple episodes ago.
Yeah, and it's the same text that has both the relationship to Abraham's marriage, custom.
It was about Leah and Rachel.
Yes.
Oh, that's it. That's
and
it.
to this. The wife thing with Sarah, the wife swap for
for Rachel and Leah.
Yeah, it
no,
was
with Sarah and Hagar.
A servant
Oh,
bears a
that
child,
one.
Yeah.
and then the
I'm
original
sorry.
barren mother conceives a child. Then the firstborn status goes to the true mother rather than the maidservant.
And so the Mari text has come up multiple times in Genesis. Yeah.
Where's its place of origin?
The city of Mari,
which
is an Assyrian city.
Okay, Middle East.
So again, related to Sargon of Akkad.
Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
And like divination, of other cultural origins is not even uncommon among the stories we've already gone over in Genesis. Was it Laban? Says, I divined it and now I know, or
Yes.
something like that.
Yeah.
And like, we don't have any indication of how he divined it, but that could be anything from like oil reading, where they would pour like an olive oil on a plate of water, and then it would basically Ouija board its way and stuff. It's super weird. I think it's called lycomancy, actually.
Yeah, or a goat where they take the liver of a goat or whatever. And
So what they would do is they would have interpretive ideas, things that they think, a hypothesis. They would cut open a goat, and then they would read its organs. Then they would write down in the book of oracles what the goat thing was. And then if it came true, they were like, oh, now we can look for this exact thing in other goats.
Correlation
Super weird
is causation.
So that's one of the theories of how like the type of Sumerian divination that is found not only in Genesis, but also in parts of Daniel kind of like raises his head.
And it is the inspiration behind a divination system in a book by James Islington.
Islington?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Don't start recommending fantasy books
No,
here.
no, but it's not just a historical thing that like people have just figured out. Like it's a known thing that appears in
it shows up in
fantasy
pop
fiction.
culture,
Yeah.
right? Just stuff like that.
But
I
the
think
Book of
he-
Oracles thing specifically, the looking back on prophecies.
If any of our listeners are interested in fantasy books, we would love to hear.
Oh, email us. Josh will have a list.
Yeah, this is what's the name of the series?
The
Licanius.
Lacanius trilogy.
Lacanius trilogy by.
James Islington or Islington.
It's his first book series. The guys like it. I'm not as much of a fan.
That's okay.
He just has bad opinions. That's
That's
all.
why I tried to shut him down. when we
Caleb,
first
his
started talking about
next book comes out in a few months.
it. Next book. It's already been covered in the first book. That's whatever. Anyways,
Joel just wants to be contrarian. That's all.
I'm being a contrarian about this. Okay, anyways, so that method of divination, when we say that it's influenced by other religions or cultures or ideas, I think that God has a way of using that, right? Like, I wouldn't say in the modern day we should look for alternate methods of divination because God's revelation is already found complete in the scripture through Christ.
Yeah, not to say that he still doesn't.
Yeah.
But it's not something that we should just, oh yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's specifically outlawed in the law of Moses.
Yeah.
Divination, no go. Kill the man if he does it.
Yeah.
But there are times where God has used divination for his purpose to lead people to him.
And that's one of the reasons why dreams are always seen in Jewish culture as far more valid, because the dreamer, the recipient of the revelation, essentially, plays no active role. It is clearly God given.
And the clearest example that people are going to know, even if you're not a Christian, is the three wise men. God directly draws people from another culture to Christ using astrology.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
indicated that they are using like pseudo astronomy.
They're probably Zoroastrians.
Yeah.
Probably. That's not surefire, but
That's
Probably.
that's what we've
Well-
guessed based off of the direction they come from. Yeah.
yeah. That or Babylonian wise men.
Well, I mean, that would be the same thing.
those would likely be.
They're Chaldeans, they're Babylonians, whatever, but they're kind of same
Yeah,
file.
Zoroastrianism was just super popular all throughout the both north and southern Mesopotamia.
Yeah, no, I just mean that the Babylonian religion that is found that the Israelites confront is highly correlated to astrology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we've gone on this odd side of divination, which I love because I think it's very interesting. I think there's like almost a redemptive quality to it. Not that can be practiced today, but just to see God speaking even before his word is put on paper, right? It's very cool.
Absolutely.
Do you think, trying to go back into the story,
Yeah.
but still related to the dreams, he goes and tells his brothers and his dad, and as far as I can tell, there's two motivations, or two possible motivations.
Yeah.
Either he's just like, hey, check this out. God likes me better than you.
Yeah.
Or is it just like an innocent, like, hey guys,
God told me to rule you.
like, this is a dream that happened. What do I do? And like, what,
They're
what
like, we
should
don't
I
know.
do?"
You interpret, man. Like this.
Exactly. Like, what do you think is the motivation there?
I think it parallels pretty closely to Jacob's kind of deceit of Isaac. I think it's claiming, probably claiming the promise of God through improper means. I think it was
Interesting.
incredibly politically dangerous to just go walk right in and say, hey, God said I'm supposed to rule you. And that means the same thing that Jacob kind of messed up when he said, hey, give me your birthright for a bowl of soup.
Right.
Right? I think they're playing with really high stakes and they're not doing it smartly.
Interesting.
A little bit of PTSD on Jacob's part is going, hey, be quiet, dude. Don't be saying this stuff out loud.
Yeah.
But it does seem like Jacob in that moment is also like Jacob's response specifically.
Yeah, because he also says he's going to rule Jacob.
And Jacob's like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Jacob's like, God told me I could do that too, so you can't really take it away from me. The battle of the blessings.
Yeah, because Jacob's response, the one who also had a similar experience, is what is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves on the ground before you? And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I did see, so like after he tells his brother, everybody, and then he's sent to go report on his brothers, right? I did see it was, I forget the author now, but in commentary I read that approximately he walks like 100 miles, travels like 100 miles to go report. So like the distance between where Jacob's at and where he goes to see his brothers, it wouldn't exactly be unbelievable for him just to die in the wild.
Yeah.
And so when he's like approaching and the brothers are like, this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess now we get into the conflict with his brothers trying to kill him. Sort of trying to kill him. So cisterns, the reason they would be empty is because of the dry season. It's pretty clear about that. But it's likely that they just thought he was going to die.
Yeah.
But they were also used to capture slaves and criminals, right? So it's likely that because they just threw him in there, somebody walked along and said, oh, you're selling him? And they're like, yeah, I guess so. Which makes the action of those traders coming along a salvific action, right? Like that is happenstance. It seems like God ordained that he would be pulled out of there, because if they just said no, then they're like, well, why not? Like, are you trying to murder this man?
Well, this is another thing that
Sell him into slavery? What, are you going to murder him? Hey, whoa, buddy.
Whoa. Well, you're just going to make him like work for a very angry woman. I don't know.
For his whole life.
here's two things that I found about the trade. Three things. First of all, the people mentioned are Ishmaelites, but in this passage, they're interchangeably referred to as also Midianites. And you would go, oh, maybe they sold, like the Ishmaelites sold to the Midianites and the Midianites sold them to the Egyptians, or people have tried to like figure out what's going on. But the author in Judges does the same thing. And so the Midianites and the Ishmaelites, the idea is that whoever the author of both books are, sees them as closely related.
Yeah.
Which is significant later on with Jethro and Moses.
So Ishmael being the son of Hagar and Midian being the son of Keturah, the second wife of Abraham.
Yes.
Yeah, so they are closely related.
They are closely
They
related.
would be from at least brothers.
Yeah.
Okay.
And not only that, the trade route going from Arabia to Gaza runs right through Dothan where they're going, where Joseph is with the brothers.
Yeah.
And because around the city of Dothan was choice ground for raising sheep.
Yeah.
So you were saying it's like something that they just happened to pop by, but that's specifically where that location, that road is specifically where the slave trade or just traders in general would be traveling through constantly to get to Egypt.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that might be me reading onto the text a little bit.
But
Nevertheless.
that's also why the cisterns are there.
Well, but Jacob wanted to go and like, hey, you know what? I'll go by myself and then I'll go save them, right? So the fact that the slavers come by before Jacob can, quote unquote, save Joseph shows that it's God's plan that he be sold into slavery, not saved by his brother, and go live in Egypt.
Yeah.
And Joseph comes to that same conclusion later on with the famous line, what you intended for evil, God intended for good. Yeah. But also the cost at this time, 20 shekels, was the common price in the law of Hammurabi for a slave, and was about 2 years' wages.
Wow. That's an expensive...
So the trade was not like, oh, we're just getting a few coins.
Yeah, that's weird.
Right?
I mean, I guess he would have already been a shepherd. Is that a reason for that? Or would it just...
No, that's the price for a human.
That's higher than I would expect it to be in the ancient Near East.
Yeah. So the fact that they get this money from, that's the kind of money that you would have to hide from your dad.
Yeah. Though you could probably buy a pretty cool robe with it, though.
Yeah. The robe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you find references to Canaanite stuff?
Yep.
Okay.
You want to take the lead on that? Go
Maybe.
ahead.
Just right off the bat, it may be of many colors. It also may just be sleeved, which is interesting.
One is way cooler than the other.
Way cooler. I don't know. Maybe.
The other thing I found was, yes, so there's Egyptian paintings depicting Canaanites wearing long sleeves with robes with in sashes going diagonally from the waist to the knee.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so that's cool. But another thing is a robe was a sign of your favor, a favor from the person giving it to you and your authority.
Oh, so that might go with the whole...
The assistant thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not only that, the color often refers to embroidery.
Okay.
So it has like it's not necessarily the colored aspect is not super uncommon. It's the fact that it was embroidered. And the coloring is referring to the long sleeves with the embroidery on it.
Of many embroideries. Yeah, that's okay. That's interesting. Yeah.
And so he's being placed above his brothers, and he gets a dream.
So you think that the dream was already fulfilled by the time any of this happened?
I'm not making like a direct like...
Well, Jacob hadn't been bowing down to him.
No.
So...
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. But it is significant that it's not just... Why would the brothers be jealous of a dream? Why would the brothers be jealous of just a cool jacket? Right? Because theirs are brown and his are colored? No. He's been placed in authority. Right? Which is also another similar to Jesus. Everybody talks about like, oh, look at his authority. And then you've got connections later on to Christ with he gives you his robe of righteousness.
Yeah.
Right. Stuff like that.
But it's white.
Yes.
I'm sorry. It's not even funny.
Yeah, the analogy breaks down a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it's just an illusion.
Well, even being sold by a man named Judah, kind of.
Yep. Both.
Monkey sees
It
pattern.
seems like they planned that.
Yep. And one of the 12.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's something interesting going on there with Judah.
Yep.
Because if you're reading along at home, you'll notice that there's a slight aside after he is sold. We don't immediately hop into Egypt. We actually go to a side story with Judah and what's her name? I got it wrong on the way here, so I don't want to mispronounce it.
Well, let's open up the Bibles we all have.
It's not Tamar. Oh, I said it wrong.
Yeah, it's Tamar.
Is it Tamar?
Yep.
Okay. Anyways, there's this whole back and forth where Judah's daughter,
It would be his daughter-in-law.
Daughter-in-law. That's
Yeah.
what it is. Tricks him into sleeping with her. Sort of.
Okay.
Sort of. It's super weird.
She marries his eldest son. He dies without producing a heir. So then she marries the one younger, and then he's like, I don't want to have a kid with you, and quote unquote wastes his seed, as the Bible says.
Yeah.
And then pattern happens, and Judah's like, I don't like this. This isn't working. You go live with your parents and whatever. And then he just kind of forgets about her, which is horrible for
he
her in that
promises him-
culture.
He promises her his
Younger
next son.
Yeah.
The youngest son, who's
Yeah.
not of age yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then he just kind of forgets about her because he doesn't care. And then she's screwed as a woman in that culture, in that predicament. And so then she pretends to be a prostitute. He sleeps with her. Then she has a kid, and then he's like, oh, comes back, hey, why are you pregnant? And then it's like, oh, no, that was you because you are not a very good father-in-law. And then he's like, oh, yeah.
Oh, fair enough. Anyways, the reason I bring this up is because I think it parallels nicely with Joseph and Potiphar.
Yes.
I think it shows how Joseph's already kind of the good guy. Right? He's already someone of higher integrity than he ought to be for his situation. Where Judah is not. Is Judah the oldest? No, he's not.
Reuben is.
Reuben's the oldest. Okay, cool. I was trying to make a connection there in my head and it didn't work out. Yeah, I just think it's interesting because clearly the author of Genesis is trying to parallel some stuff here.
Well, and Reuben even goes and tries to rescue Joseph.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to. He wants to. He goes with it, and then he's like, "I'm going to go back and get
I thought it's Judah.
whichever."
I don't think Judah goes back to get
I
him, does
thought
he?
it was.
Let's.
It's
Man,
Bible
shows
time.
how much I was paying attention, guys.
Yeah, when Reuben returned to the pit and saw Joseph was not there, he tore his
Was
clothes.
Reuben.
Oh, forgive me.
Yeah, the oldest brother was looking out for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, which, if you're going to make parallels to Jesus' disciples, the oldest disciple, Peter, goes to Jesus and then fails.
Hey, that's pretty interesting. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's hard to make direct.
I'll go
comparisons there.
with you, right? I'll
Yeah.
make sure this doesn't happen, and then denies him,
Yeah.
right? Tears, weeps, and falls apart.
But that's just God's perfect plan through imperfect means. I think that's all that is.
Yep.
And we're just hanging out in the Bible doing normal Bible things, and that's one of them.
But Potiphar,
Monkey sees pattern.
I'm seeing a pattern. Yeah, Potiphar. So Potiphar's wife is actually the star of the show, despite not having her name mentioned. Which is
maybe because she's mean.
she's not a very nice woman. I think she's kind of rude. to Joseph.
seductress.
So yeah, that's where it parallels with the Judah story. Is hey, don't get seduced or it'll be really bad for you. Right? It's showing the integrity of Joseph. Weirdly enough, doesn't his jacket play a part in this one as well?
Yeah, his
Yeah,
clothing
he once
also plays a
again
part.
she takes his jacket and claims that he came after her in whatever context, and then tells Potiphar that this happened, despite her being the one seeking after Joseph to begin with.
Because, like I mentioned before, it's a symbol of authority, right? The robe, which means he was given it by Potiphar because you could identify people by their robe.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got the Joseph, the brothers bring the robe to Jacob and they're like, see, look, he's dead. Right. He goes, oh my gosh, Joseph. And then Potiphar's wife goes to Potiphar and says, see his robe. This is
He
Joseph's.
tried to sleep with me.
Right. And then you've got,
He, the author does a great, at least he tries to show how similar to Jacob when he went to Laban's place, Laban prospered. And so when Joseph went to Potiphar's place, Potiphar prospered.
Yeah, he's like put in charge of
Yeah.
basically his entire
Yeah.
household.
And that's the pattern out of Joseph's life.
And
now.
Potiphar was an official to
Yeah.
Pharaoh.
Which, okay, so little
Yeah,
bit.
you had a whole thing about
Yeah,
this.
I don't know if I buy into it, but it's funny.
I don't know if funny's the right word, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's funny. Victor P. Hamilton has this weird in his commentary on. No, I guess it's a commentary. Yeah, it's a commentary on the Pentateuch. He has this weird thing where he's just like, anyway, so she may have just been sexually promiscuous, or as being an official to the pharaoh, Potiphar might be a eunuch, and so his wife was just, horny.
Yep.
And then he was like, anyway, so back to the story of Joseph. Just,
Yeah.
And
what?
there's another note, which is Potiphar might not believe his wife.
Exactly. Exactly. That's another thing he mentions. It's just like, anyway, that would kind of explain why Potiphar's like, yeah, well.
Yeah. Well, because he
It
gets
happens, he in
thrown.
prison.
Well, because Joseph gets thrown in the next story in a political prison, the royal prison for political prisoners, not executed for rape like the law is. And so either Potiphar is like, I really like this guy,
And I know my wife.
but that's not. That seems less convincing. Sorry, that seems more convincing. I know Joseph. His character speaks above him, right? For him. I don't believe my wife. That seems more convincing to me than I like Joseph. Even though he raped my wife, I'm going to let him live in a prison and not get executed.
Yeah.
So it seems like he doesn't believe his wife. I know Joseph. He's an upstanding man.
And that parallels with, what is it? The Tale of Two Brothers?
Yes. It's an Egyptian. It parallels. It's another one of
Kind of.
those.
Like,
Yeah. It's so in the very famous, by very famous, I mean, the Egyptians really liked it at the time. There's a tale called The Tale of Two Brothers about the dog, the god of death, Anubis and Bata. And in their story, one of the events that takes place is one of the brothers is working somewhere and gets seduced by the boss's wife, blah, blah, blah. And so because he's going to Egypt, he's in Egypt. It's this big correlation between one of their most famous stories at the time.
Yeah.
The Israelites who have just come out of Egypt, who are receiving the book of Genesis, know the story.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's some thematic ties, but then it just doesn't follow through, and it doesn't seem to care.
Because it's an aside in that story.
Yeah.
Most of the stories about the rivalry between the two brothers, and they're like, deity. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if we're doing a biblical theology of cloaks and jackets, and that Joseph's like top candidate.
Yep.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And I think we end up going into, is that Act 4?
Prison time?
Yeah, so Act 2 was Joseph's conflict in the imperial power of Egypt. It's 41. And then 42 to 44 is family conflict in Canaan. Okay, no, it's not yet into the family conflict. So we're still in Act 2. Oh my goodness, we're still in Act 2.
Hey.
Moses.
He's in prison.
He's
It's
in prison.
sad.
And we do it again. It's the double dream, which we've already mentioned the significance for. But it also seems to indicate that Joseph just has dream interpretation. That God does it, and it's not by his power, but it seems to be consistent enough that he just is the archetypical wise man.
It's reminiscent of court tales.
Yeah, it's court tales. Daniel imitates him, right? Like the way that the spirit of the gods is upon him. So the spirit of the gods is a translation in Daniel, which alludes to the story of Joseph. It can be said that the spirit of the gods is upon him, just because of the way Elohim is used. There's actually no indication. So it could be that it's alluding specifically to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob having an influence on Joseph, or it could just be that from the perception of the onlookers, the Egyptians, the culture that he's in, it appears he has the the skills that their wise men would have, which is the spirit of the gods being upon them.
Yeah.
So depending on how you want to take that, it's not parallel to the Holy Spirit, but it is if it's God specifically upon him.
Well, and if it is, but the correlation to the Holy Spirit would be if it is God doing that, then it would be spirit empowerment.
Yeah.
And so is it saying the text is not saying the Holy Spirit because there's the conception of that is not there yet because we're in the first book of the Bible.
Yeah.
But us New Testament people looking back on it would go the Holy Spirit.
With the fullness of revelation we'd be. Yeah. Well, it's again like when he went to Potiphar's house. He goes into prison and then he's like, "Hey, you know what? This guy's really good at administration. He's honest. He has integrity." And so it might even be that maybe Potiphar may have played a hand. Even that's what I've read elsewhere as well. Where it's
if
like
he was an official,
and it's just like, hey, everybody kind of knows that you're kind of got screwed over.
Yeah.
But no, it's Joseph rises in authority and in responsibility even within the prison.
Yeah.
Yep.
Who are the two prisoners again?
The
Cupbearer?
wine drinker, the cupbearer,
wine drinker
And the baker.
Baker. Specifically, the cupbearer is the reason I said wine
the one who
drinkers.
survives.
He's the one that tests the wine for the pharaoh, so he doesn't get assassinated. So
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the baker has this dream that shows he's gonna die, and he does.
Yeah, I
Proof
had
one.
I had a children's Bible that went through drawings and it was illustrated, and I always felt so bad because it drew the baker in this really sympathetic. I always felt bad for him.
was it the one where the dude it depicts the dream and it's just him in a cage getting eaten by crows and it's just him slumped over like a carcass?
Man, that's not a kid's Bible. I don't think.
It was.
Really?
It was in water paint.
That's brutal.
I think so. Was it the one where he's trying to fight the crows with the baskets on his head and he's a fat guy?
Yeah.
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 It's so weird.
Are we bonding over a traumatic child experience with a Bible?
Yeah.
Yeah, some of those illustrations, you didn't really need them there. You know?
Yeah, sometimes the Bible's an intense book for adults, and every now and then we're just like, anyway, so here you go, kids.
I water painted to death.
There's some parts that are so intense you don't hear sermons on them.
Yeah, but okay, so Baker dies.
Yep.
But the cupbearer, Joseph's like, hey, you're gonna make it back in the palace.
Hey, talk about me, please.
Hey, could you say something? And is it 7 years? I believe it's 7 years that he stays in there, which actually ties it into Jacob's whole thing with his wife.
Yep.
Laban tricking him. Which is no good.
2. That was a 2.
It's a long time, and sadly, while you guys are finding the time, the wine drinker forgets.
Yeah. How do you forget that?
I think what it is you just got out of prison because of you're put in a political prison, right? So the reason he's put in there is either because he failed at his job or he's suspected for treason.
Right.
Right. Among those kind of things, he gets out. It's traumatic. He's in a pit. Those prisons are not like today's prisons. Those are bad places.
It was 2 years. You're right. Yeah.
And so I think him getting out, he's overexcited that he's out. He's back at his job. He's also terrified because he's under watch if he was put in a political prison, right? So people are watching him. He's consumed with himself. The mix of emotions, the joys, the terror. And the last thing he wants to do is go talk to the guy that put him in prison and ask him a favor.
Well, and he's forgotten. The cupbearer forgets. But then the text several times, I think, in that segment, in that act, the text says, but God remembered Joseph.
Yes.
Which is very reminiscent of, but God remembered Noah.
Yeah.
Or, but God remembered the promise that he had with Abraham.
Yeah.
And stuff like that.
Which comes up in Exodus, which there would be a clear tie between the Lord heard the groaning of his people. The Lord remembered them. Yeah. Which is super interesting.
But another double dream occurs.
Yeah. Double down, double dream. And this is another one for Pharaoh.
Yes.
Which is kind of cool. It's like the first time they actually get to go to Egypt, and they don't just screw them over with like some weird wife shenanigans stuff.
Well, actually, it started off with a wife shenanigan.
It did. A wife shenanigan. A typology of wife shenanigans.
Oh no.
We have to write that book now. The
I wanna write
typology
that-
of wife shenanigans.
That's no
The
good.
biblical theology of wife shenanigans.
Ah, man.
We're getting canceled.
Maybe.
We haven't even started.
We haven't even started yet. Don't cancel us before you've heard what terrible things we have to say. That's going to make it into the
So
clips.
there's a double dream. Pharaoh's super sad.
Yeah.
The first one is the grain.
It's about the famine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's horrifying.
Yeah.
Like
It would be a terrible thing to hear as a ruler.
as a ruler, yeah. Hey, everything's fine. Everything's fine. Hey, but then it's going to be horrible and it's going to be worse than it when everything was
Everything's
fine.
great. And then everything's bad.
Yeah. Yeah, everything's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the badness swallows up the greatness. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah. The bad is so bad you forget the good was good.
Yes. In grain and in meat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so specifically the cow one terrifies me specifically.
Yeah. Probably because that same children's book.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
'cause you just see like the scrawny, like bony
cow eating
emaciated-
up the big one?
Yeah.
Weird.
We did read the same book. Yeah. So double dream reiterating, because oftentimes it was seen in those cultures with the double dream that it was, there's a pattern.
Yeah.
If you got a triple dream, it was confirmation from the gods that this was happening.
Yeah.
But double dream.
So before this, there would have been no reason for the Pharaoh to believe that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had anything to do with this.
Mm-hmm.
But it's only through the usefulness of Joseph, the gift of the interpretation of dreams, that God is even made known within this Pharaoh, and even the favor that's going to be placed upon the Israelites because of this is God using the Egyptians once again to bless the Israelites.
Yeah.
Which He's done before, and the Egyptians just keep basically giving the Israelites a bunch of stuff. It's an interesting go.
Yep.
But that does draw us into the next event, because did you have something to say about that?
Are we moving past the dreams?
I think so, unless you have something more to say.
Yes, specifically. It's related to the robes. So,
Okay.
Sorry. Are we going into Joseph being rewarded?
Yeah.
Okay. It comes up there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's rewarded with because he's in charge of the storehouses.
Yes.
He becomes part of the administrative class of Pharaoh's basically doomsday preparation.
Yeah.
Because he now believes that
Yeah.
everything's gonna.
He makes him second to Pharaoh, second to him.
Yeah.
And what he does is he gives him the signet ring
Yeah.
and puts him on Pharaoh's chariot
Yeah.
and brings him around town,
That's
right.
so cool.
right? So that everybody knows, see this guy, he's got the ring and he's got the chariot, right? Symbol of favor and authority,
Yeah.
like the robes,
Yeah.
but Egyptian style,
Is this progressive parallelism?
potentially.
Cool.
So it's the penultimate version of everything that he's been given. Dreams, rings, favor and authority, blessing,
Wow.
destroyed, rings, favored blessing, robe, dreams, favored blessing,
Yeah.
destroyed, robes, favored blessing, and it occurs.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah. So it's bringing him up above the entirety of Egypt, and he's not even above his family anymore, right? So that's when the next part comes: is the famine happens, and like we said before, what do Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob all do when famine hits? They go to Egypt. It's ridiculous. Anyways, so they show up.
One of them goes to the Philistines, I think.
How do they go to the Philistines? They don't exist yet.
That's what it says.
When? Where?
I could be wrong. Let's move on. I'm sorry.
Maybe I just don't understand who the Philistines are.
They go to the cities,
they go to the big cities. Are you talking
major
about Abimelech?
nations.
Yeah.
I don't think he's a Philistine, is he?
Well, he's not Egyptian.
That was the sound of confused Joel. Okay, well,
But they go to kings of other lands.
yeah.
Yeah. And specifically with Abraham, goes to Egypt.
Yeah. So if this is like, we're getting close to the season finale. This is, if we're looking at this as an episode or a season, this is
where it all comes together.
he gets put on his chariot and then everything goes black. And it says, continue watching.
Yeah, you're expecting when Jacob arrives that he's going to tell Rebecca and Leah, hey, you're my sister.
What?
Like with Abraham. Like with Abraham.
Hey, can we move on?
No, I'd like to sit in this Netflix analogy of Joseph for just a little bit longer.
Goodness.
I think I would love to see the story of Joseph, but wait, that's little Joe by the
It is significant that Jacob doesn't tell his wife that, hey, pretend to be my sister for a while, like the other patriarchs.
Does
do.
Joseph have a wife at this point?
No, Jacob.
Well, he has kids. Oh, sorry.
Jacob.
Yes, he does. He does. Because he marries
The daughter of the priest of On.
Yeah, and then
okay.
Yeah.
and the two names of his sons. One means like healing the sorrows of the past.
Yeah.
And then the other, I had it written down.
Isn't it Methuselah and Ephraim?
Manasseh.
Manasseh.
Manasseh
Methuselah is the wrong
means
name.
forgetfulness.
Oh yeah, it does.
Yeah. That's why it's significant
Ephraim.
that Manasseh forgets God.
Manasseh and Ephraim.
Okay.
Yeah.
The second son name is the reminder that God will make Joseph a fruitful servant even in a land of torment, uncertainty, and disapproval.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's Victor P. Hamilton again
Nice.
from his commentary.
But yeah, so the sons get sent to Egypt.
Yeah. And Joseph really takes him for a ride.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of awesome. That's why I say there's like character development too, is because there's this whole where he's sitting at the table with his brothers and he's giving them food to eat as they've come to negotiate for basically, because they're growing in size, right? They're a decent sized nation. He's got 12 sons and they've all got children of their own, and then they're starting to build a bit of an empire, right? Just as Joseph has. But Joseph wasn't included in this building of an empire. So now they're coming to him and he's like, oh man, you guys suck. Right? Like,
Well, it's interesting. Victor P. Hamilton, his whole thing. I hate to bring him up continually, but anyway,
fun name to say.
it's good. His whole thing is like, yeah, is he being vindictive? Is he being like, is he trying to get revenge? Is he testing the waters? And his whole thing is, I don't really know, but he cries more than everyone else in Genesis combined. Because every now and then he like, I need to leave the room. And then he goes to the back, balls his eyes out, and then comes back and goes, you should go back to your family.
Well, we should then explain the back and forth.
Okay, yeah.
Do you want to?
You can go for it if you know it off the top of your head.
So they come to Egypt wanting to buy grain.
Yep.
Joseph's there because he's the head of the grain operation, because for the 7 years that they weren't in Egypt, that he was, being the head of the operation, that he told Pharaoh to do was take a segment of all of the harvested grain, put it into storehouses so that when the famine comes, we can ration it out for those 7 years, right? Because because of the time of blessing, those 7 years is going to produce more than you do normally a year. So take the bonus, put that in, keep it for the 7 years you're not going to produce. Smart plan.
Yeah.
He does, it pays off. They've got so much they're selling to the other nations because, like in the previous stories, Joseph is a blessing to the nations and gives, basically, he produces so much that they can sell to other people and help them out. And so the Canaanites come in, they want to buy some grain, and Joseph's like, oh, hey, bring those guys to the side. I want to do something with them.
Yeah.
Because he recognizes them and they don't recognize him. Because he's wearing Egyptian garb now.
Yeah.
He's got the eye makeup on that you see in all the movies.
He looks cool.
He looks very different in that children's Bible. Even I didn't recognize him.
Yeah. Right? I mean, if the movies are accurate enough, right? A lot of the Canaanites have long hair.
Yeah.
Being high status, he's probably bald now.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of things that are different about him. But they bring him to his house because they're like, cool, let's get more grain. He sells it to them, and then what exactly? he tests his brothers. First of all, he wants to give them grain, but he wants them to bring their youngest brother. But their youngest brother's not there.
Yeah.
Benjamin stayed home because it's Jacob's favorite. Yeah. Now that Joseph's
gone, and he loved Rebecca more.
Yeah.
No, Rebecca? Yes.
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 And so
Rachel.
Is it Rachel?
Rebecca's Isaac's wife.
Okay, that's what it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I got it wrong.
So he tells them, go back and get him. But what is it? Is it he keeps... They have to go back. They get some of the food.
Yeah, and they're like, "Hey, bring your younger brother."
And we'll give you more.
They bring their younger brother, which would be Benjamin.
Yes.
Yes.
The youngest brother.
And then it's at that point when he's like, "Oh, let's have another feast and whatever." And then anyway, he puts his silver goblet in the basket of grain, and then they go away. He sends chariots after them or whatever they find, and they go, you thieving guys.
Yeah.
And then they come back, and then Judah's like, "Don't imprison them, take me."
And this is significant because Jacob, when they came back, he didn't want to send Benjamin the first time because he wanted to make sure Benjamin was safe.
Yeah.
And by sending, when they came back and Judah tells the father, he wants us to bring Benjamin. Right? And Judah's like, you better make sure he comes back alive.
Yeah.
Right? And he's telling Judah this, the one who sold the last youngest son.
Yeah.
And then...
it's at that point that Joseph just breaks down.
Well, so they do the whole thing, and he's like, I'm keeping your youngest son.
Yeah.
And Judah's like, no, please don't, because Judah's the one that sold Joseph.
Yeah.
Judah's the one that was promised by Jacob, made a promise to Jacob that he would bring Benjamin back.
Yeah.
This is his job, and he's doing it again.
Yeah. So you think if it is vindictive in the sense that he's wanting Judah to suffer the whole thing again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
the disappointment of his father again.
Yeah, because now Judah at this time, he's now been married, has kids of his own. He's a father. Like he's grown up.
Yeah.
Judah's grown up. He's now taking charge of the brothers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's Judah's specific line that is so crazy to me. So the passage is Genesis 44, like 24 to 34, like the end of the chapter. And it's Judah pleading to Joseph. He doesn't know it's Joseph. He thinks it's just head guy right underneath Pharaoh, who's got all the authority in the world and is going to kill their youngest brother. Yeah. And he basically gives them the download of like, hey, when we went, we said we would do this, but our father, he said, basically our father said, the last time you guys went out with my youngest son, he came back in pieces and he died. And he was my favorite. He meant everything to me, right? Now I have a new youngest son from the same wife, Benjamin. If you take him and he doesn't come back, you are dragging me down to Sheol in this evil act, right? And he says, therefore, as soon as I came to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, his life is bound to the boy's life. As soon as he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die, and your servant will bring down the gray hairs of your servant, our father, with sorrow to Sheol. For your servant became a pledge of safety for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father all my life. Now, therefore, please, let your servant remain instead of the boy as a servant to my Lord, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my father. And that's when Joseph goes to step away, because his brother is completely repentant.
Yeah.
Right? I killed my first brother, and I'm about to do it the same if this happens.
Because he sends them away. balls his eyes out, and then he's like, okay, let them in. And then he tells them who he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that
Who
part
is.
is also really good.
He does the whole, what you intended for evil, God intended for good. Which is just it's so wild.
That's emblematic for the whole story.
Oh, I think you can build a whole biblical theology on it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because it says he wept aloud so that the Egyptians heard it. And the household of Pharaoh heard it.
Yeah.
They heard it. His brothers heard it, right? And Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? Right, just opens up immediately, right? And his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence. They were like, what?
Yeah.
Like, they're like utterly lost. Judah just emptied his soul to this guy, asking for repentance, not knowing it's the guy he's talking about in the story. Right? And it's just beautiful. He says, come near to me, please. And it's like group, like brother hug. Like,
Embrace
please come
me.
here. Like, weep with me. Right? Yeah. I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. Basically saying, it's okay.
Yeah.
Don't hate yourselves because of what you've done. Because God sent me before you to preserve life.
Yeah.
Joseph knows. Because and then they do the famous line, what you intended for evil, God intended for good.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing.
And then they go back for Jacob. Jacob comes. There's a whole big reunion there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a much better verse than "For I know the plans I have for you."
Well, it's because for I know the plans I have for you is like, it doesn't encompass the idea of that God is Lord over evil.
Yeah.
Right. And though that verse is still true and good and the word of the Lord.
Well, it could be a parallel verse with this.
Yeah.
Where it's the entirety of the nation of Israel is blessed by this, whereas the nation of Israel is, I think, 70 people. It says the 70 people enter Egypt, so it's like, I guess.
70 people that are probably members of the family.
Yeah, it's more likely because of the way they counted population. It was more likely 70 men. So that could be.
Yeah.
But then their slaves, their servants, the people that they have employed under them as well. Those are probably 70 men of the family.
70 men of the family, then all the others.
Yeah.
That are not mentioned.
Yeah.
So more like a tribe.
Their interaction with Egypt is probably closer seen to like a vassal treaty than it is refugees.
Well, they just give them the whole land of Goshen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're just like, hey, you know what? We don't eat what you guys eat. We're not really shepherds. Have this place that makes sense to you, but not for us.
Yeah.
Well, it sets the scene for Exodus as well, that the amount of trading that was going on, the amount of food that they had to take out because of the famine, likely just kept building up debts to the point where that's how the Israelites got into slavery in the first place. Was that them paying off their debts eventually became... They went to debtor's prison and they got sold into slavery.
Yeah.
But just as Joseph is emblematic of Christ, he's also emblematic of Israel's Exodus. So if the promised land in this story is Egypt, it will be Canaan in the next one.
Yeah. And that's that leads us into the Christological connections.
Yeah.
The Christ connections. Do you mind if I just run through them?
Go for it.
Okay. So you've got Joseph. He's a son of the patriarch, right? Of the family. And is basically from a young age promised kingship. Stars symbolize his kingship, right? So you've got the connection to the star in the sky leading to his birth. Yeah. The promise of the stars in his dreams. You've also got, he has 12 brothers, 12 disciples. One of them sells him for the same amount of money that Judas sells Jesus to the ruling body. And he is sold in slavery, right? Bought for that the 30 coins, the shekels. The oldest brother, Reuben, in parallel with Peter, tries to go back to save him, fails, rejects him, similar thing, weeps, fails. The Judah connection.
Yeah.
Then when he is then with Potiphar's wife, he's accused of a crime that he is not guilty of.
Yeah.
Jesus is accused of a crime he is not guilty of.
Yeah.
Thrown into prison. He goes down into the pit, theologically dies.
Yeah.
But what's significant is the two people that are with him in the place where he dies, near to his death. Cupbearer.
One is saved, one is not.
No. Wine and bread.
That too. But one is saved and one is not.
Yes. Because the bread guy, he's broken. His body is destroyed. The wine guy is continuously poured out in front of the king.
Stretch, but I like it.
It is a stretch. It feels like literary criticism more than it does prophetic typology.
Yeah. Then he rises up out of it at the breaking of his body and the rising and the pouring out of the wine, the blood, right? To second under Pharaoh, second under the Father, given authority over the nations. Yeah. Which in turn provides salvation for his brothers, the ones that condemned him, his people, right? Then he offers forgiveness for him because, like Jesus says, they do not know what they are doing. Yeah. God had this planned, right? And so you see those connections. They're brought into the land of promise. The family is saved. The father and the son are reunited.
It's so cool.
Yeah. You've got the robe imagery. Yeah. Upon Jesus's death, right? When he's a man of great status and authority, known by everyone, right? And is killed for it, right? In both those stories with Joseph, his robe is taken. Jesus, on the point of his death, his robes are taken and distributed amongst the guards.
And even the righteous sufferer terminology we were talking about earlier connects everybody together in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's huge. He is the man with the Spirit, the one who speaks the words of God. Yeah. He is, in this story, sinless. His sin is not recorded.
Unless it is the flaunting his dreams. Yeah. But it's like him and Daniel.
Yep.
Those are the ones where their character does not falter.
Yeah.
Per se.
But specifically the bread and wine thing, the reason I bring that up is it would not be a thing that, like, in the passage you're going, oh, this is significant because of a later covenant. Yeah. Like, that would not be anything, but going back and looking at it and seeing at the place, the point of death, the Last Supper, right, at the breaking of the body and the pouring out of the blood, he is raised up.
Yeah. I'm sure there's more.
Yeah.
Joseph has the most amount of ink spilt on him in Genesis. It's kind of wild.
I think it's all set up for Exodus, man. Yeah. I think, like, if you take Mosaic authorship, it's got to be a big deal to figure why they were in Egypt in the first place. It establishes national identity. It establishes joint struggle. It even establishes the fulfillment of God's promises.
Yep. And the expectation that they will get out of slavery.
Yeah.
And so they see that in Joseph's life. They see that now in their life being brought out. And now they're either, hypothetically, they receive this text or what became this text at Mount Sinai. And they are like, okay, so this is the plan of God. Much like how God brought then Jacob and the whole family to Goshen, which was a beautiful land, lush for their life. So God is bringing us to Canaan, which is the promised land, which is also lush, and was ultimately promised to.
Not just that, the thing that Timothy Mackey brings up in the Bible Project is Goshen and garden in Hebrew are one character off.
So you think there's, like, kind of a play on words going there?
Potentially.
Begins and ends in a garden, but people still die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Meaning, this is what it'll be like, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you think we missed something, if you see a tie into Christ, if you see a tie into some other part of the Old Testament, or even if you just have a personal reflection on it, we would love to hear it. That's my big ask for this episode. That and maybe like show a friend the podcast.
That's the other connection. We brought it up in the resurrection episode. They don't recognize him until he reveals himself. The road to Emmaus.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yet he still
specifically.
yet he dines with them.
Yeah. Dines with them, blah, 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 everything. They don't recognize him. And then he's like, hey, I'm Joseph.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Jesus. And they're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. We didn't even recognize you. Oh my goodness.
You were sitting with us for hours.
Yeah. I still don't understand the forensics of that. How that works. Did he change his appearance? Did he just hide the truth from them? How did it work? We won't know.
Egyptian style is just so different.
Oh no, I don't mean
Yeah.
for Joseph, I mean for Christ.
Oh, illusion magic. What?
I don't think you can say illusion.
D&D illusion magic.
I don't think Jesus
self.
played D&D. Just gonna say that.
What?
Okay,
Oh, yeah, sure.
Fair enough. Are you saying
that's gonna end up in a short or the intro. Anyway, speaking of intros, outros.
Yeah, let's do an outro that I'd already started, and then Josh was like, "Oh wait,
I'm so
I'm
sorry.
a
Did you
listener."
start the outro?
Josh just. Oh my goodness, Josh is playing the part of the fan, which is responding to questions I ask. Anyways, it's a whole thing. We're trying to build a community that starts conversation around the Christian worldview. And the best way to do that is to tell us we're right, wrong, or in between. So when I say I want fan interaction, we want emails. We want to know if you agree with what we're putting out there, if you have something to add. I just took
Questions.
questions, concerns, comments.
It can be theological. It can be you also agree with me that Josh's voice sounds like a dude, bro.
It does.
I do sound like a surfer,
good with
bro.
I'm good with whatever.
Hey,
comments.
Yeah.
Let's build this community. It's good. I'm fun. This is fun.
Did you say I'm fun?
Yeah, and that's
It's
a
me,
lie.
I'm fun.
That's a lie.
No, please,
No.
guys.
This could be fun.
That sounds desperate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
much like the ending
Anyways,
of this episode.
continue this
No, this is
outro.
fun. This outro's good. Let's try it a third time. Hey guys, you've listened to Second Rate Saints. Thanks for listening this far. Please subscribe. Please check out our YouTube, our Instagram, our website, our blog posts, our book reviews, and whatever else you can find that's branded with that little dude with the halo. Okay, thanks guys. Have a good week.
And that's a dope story.